Hey guys, today we're going to edit a portrait photo in Adobe Lightroom CC. This tutorial is aimed at beginners and intermediate users looking to brush up on some skills. It will be split into three sections: importing, developing, and ultimately exporting the photo. If I'm going too fast on anything, feel free to pause and you can ask questions by commenting. I'm going to try and keep this short because every other time I've recorded this has gone for over an hour. So let's get started. Okay, here we are in my Adobe Lightroom library, and as you can see, I don't have any photos. So let's import some by clicking Import in the bottom left-hand corner. I want to cover importing because I've noticed a lot of photographers, even ones who have experience with many years of experience, they'll just kind of brush aside importing. They add their photos into the library, immediately start working on them, and they don't realize that there's so many options just in this window that can improve their workflow. So my photos are luckily just on my desktop. And today I'm just going to be editing one photo, this photo of her. Before I import her in, I just want to talk about two things: the method of import and previews. So what are methods of import? Well, you have four options up here: add, move, copy, and copy as DNG. What do they mean? Adding simply leaves the file wherever it is. So it could be on your desktop, it could be on an SD card, it could be on a portable hard drive. And if you use add, it just leaves it where it is, and it points Lightroom at that original file. So Lightroom knows that's the file that we're editing today. Copy and move, well, they're quite self-explanatory. You simply either move the file to a new location or you make an additional copy to a new location. And I typically use copy because I like to keep an original on the SD card and then one on my computer that I'm working on. Just in case something goes wrong, if something crashes or gets corrupted, at least I have those originals on the SD card. Now watch this. As I click copy, or if I click move, I'll get two extra panels here on the right-hand side. And those panels are file renaming and destination. Well, destination is pretty self-explanatory. That's just wherever the file is going to move to or be copied to. But file renaming is very powerful. File renaming basically allows you to rename a whole series of files. For example, if this was, I don't know, photos from a wedding and the client's name was Rachel, we could call it Wedding Rachel, for example, and then you can just do a starting number. So I could say, so if I left it like this, it means that it would edit the photos, it would import the photos as Wedding Rachel 1, Wedding Rachel 2, 3, 4, 5, so on and so forth. And this is great if you want to share photos with other photographers or with your client, and you can easily reference them by saying, hey, Wedding Rachel 5 looks great, or what do you think of Wedding Rachel 14 or something? So it's great to have that option there and to use it. And rather than what I've seen in the past where a lot of people would just go, oh, okay, I clicked my files, import, and they immediately go in. The last option is copy as DNG. And you should only really use this if you know that you're going to work in Lightroom and then move to another application, such as Photoshop, or it could be any other one of the applications that support DNG. So DNG is a format that Adobe created, which is a proprietary RAW format. And there's really no advantage to working in DNG other than typically they have smaller files than original RAW files. Like for instance, this is a CR2 file, so that's a Canon. This is NEF, that's a Nikon, ARW, that's a Sony camera. So DNGs tend to be smaller in size. However, if you would choose this option, it means you'd import all of these photos, they'd copy, and then they'd be converted to DNG. So it actually dramatically increases the time of import. So really that option is it's only there if you have something you're doing with the photo after Lightroom. However, if you're just working in Lightroom, and then you want to edit everything and then export, then I wouldn't recommend this option as you're just adding time and there's really no reason for it. So we're going to stick to add today. But before I import our photo in, and I'm going to make sure I've just selected her, all of these photos, I want to talk about build previews. In terms of build previews, you have 4 options: minimal, embedded, sidecar, and standard. So previews are we're seeing previews right now on this screen, and they'd be the embedded previews in the embedded JPEG previews in the raw files. Previews are what you see when you're not zoomed into an image. So if I were to click minimal, that's the smallest preview possible, and it doesn't look bad. Like even on a high resolution screen, it doesn't look bad. But you will notice if you zoom in on a minimal preview build, Lightroom will lag just very slightly. And why it's lagging, the reason it's lagging is because Lightroom has to build that preview and it has to show all those original high resolution pixels. And that's because the preview that you built is minimal. It's the smallest amount possible. So that's where you can do a one-to-one preview, which is the preview has all the original pictures of the file. It means that like the preview that you're seeing is exactly what it's going to look like when it's ultimately exported at full resolution. The disadvantage of one-to-one, however, is that it takes up more space because you have to build a preview for every single file that you import, and there'll be larger previews. And it also takes a lot longer because Lightroom has to import the photos into the Lightroom library, and then it has to build these very large previews. But for today, we're actually going to leave it on one-to-one. And it's up to you really to experiment and to decide what works best for you. Like you might be working in an environment where you have to edit a lot of photos very fast, in which case you might just want a minimal preview and then just like start working. Or you might have time, or you might have a small amount of photos. So it's just up to you what works best for you. But by default, this is on minimal. And you might find that one-to-one or even one of these other options, which are not quite as large as one-to-one, but they're more than minimal, such as embedded or standard, you might find that they work better for your workflow. But I'm going to leave mine one-to-one, add, so it just stays on my desktop, and let's import. Okay, so importing the file. Now it's building the preview, and it's done. On your computer, it might be slower or faster, depending on how new your computer is. My computer is pretty powerful, and it is just one photo. That's why it didn't take very long. But if you had like hundreds or even thousands of photos, when it was building that one-to-one preview, that window, it might take ages. It might take like several minutes. Anyway, let's head straight into the develop module. And once we're here, I'm actually going to get rid of a few things. I'm going to get rid of this by just clicking at the top here. And I'm going to get rid of this tab and this, because we're not doing anything over here really. I have no presets, and I'm pretty confident that I don't need the history. I just want the maximum amount of space just to look at the photo. So first things first, what's the look that we're going to go for with this photo? What do we like about it? What do we think needs improvement? So what I do like about it is I like that there's dimensions to it. You have the blurred background, then your subject, and then you have the flowers in front. I think the flowers provide depth, and it's a lot more interesting than if you were just looking at a photo of her against some trees. What I don't like is that the highlights are way too hot, especially here in the top of her hair and here in the flowers. You notice how bright they are, and it actually, in my mind, that distracts you from the purpose of this image, because really the focal point is right here on her face. So this is what we should be focused on. But that's not the brightest part of the image. These flowers are way too hot and distracting us. So the first thing I'm going to look at is the histogram, which is located at the top right here. And what the histogram is it's a graphical representation of your photo. It's basically a bar graph that's split into 5 parts. That's your blacks, shadows, exposure, highlights, and whites. And it's good to understand how to read a histogram, because sometimes it can tell you things that you can't see with your own 2 eyes. For example, I knew that the highlights were a bit hot here, but the fact that this triangle is white here, well, if I click on it, now it highlights all the clipped highlights in its photos. So clipped highlights are blown out, meaning that they're so bright that all the visual information in that part of the image is just gone. It's just pure white. And typically we don't like blown highlights. They look quite ugly and garish, and they're also very distracting. I think in this case, they're especially distracting. So I can actually remove them by just going to this highlight slider in the basic panel and then sliding down to the left. And I'll keep sliding down, and then eventually you will see that triangle's gone away. So if I slide up, the triangle's there, and you will see the red even builds up over time. But I'm going to go all the way down, and then the triangle's gone, and the histogram, and that's it. Like now we have no more blown out highlights, and those highlights aren't as distracting. However, that's actually not going to be my first step. I think I'll just reset that. And we can reset any one of these sliders by just double clicking on the knob, and then I'll click on that triangle to get rid of that red. So I like this image. I think I want to go for like something a bit warmer, something reminiscent of summer, because we're approaching summer here in Australia. So let me think. Okay, I'm going to try something actually I haven't tried in possibly over a year. I'm going to change this to black and white. And don't worry, you can always change between black and white and color at any time. No matter what changes you make, you can always go back. That's a great thing about Lightroom. It's a non-destructive editor, so you're free to do whatever you want to do with it. But I'm going to change it to black and white because it's a technique I learned from somewhere. I actually don't remember where I learned this. But it was this photographer was talking about how when you change to black and white, you're no longer distracted by color, but you're just looking at the exposure of the image and the relationship between the bright parts, such as here in the hair, and the dark parts, such as here inside, like the hair face and the hair where they meet. Because I want this photo to have a bit more of a punch and contrast, because if we switch back to color, it's nice, but it's lacking in any sort of contrast, and I just feel like it's a bit of a flat photo. So we go to black and white, and we'll scroll down, and we won't touch the basic panel at all, but instead we'll go to tone curve. And when you first open tone curve, yours will actually probably look like this. It'll have the tone curve here, and then I'll have all these sliders underneath. But I don't want to be in this mode because this mode doesn't really give me the freedom that I want for this. So I'm going to click this button, and then that allows me to plot my own points. So what the tone curve is, it's similar to the histogram in that it's a graphical representation of your photo, and it allows you to plot points on this line and then change tones. So you have the darker tones down here, mid-tones around here, and then highlights and whites up here. So for example, if I were to click here and then raise this up, this should raise the brightness of the whole image. But then if I bring this down, it would just bring the blacks down. But the highlights, see, they moved up, so the highlights are now more bright. And that looks quite strange. So I'll just double click that, and that'll just reset them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create what's called an S-curve. An S-curve, it creates contrast in an image, and it's also very popular when you want to emulate that film look. Emphasis on the word look, because it's not really how all film looks. It's just what we think film looks after so many years of Instagram. So you do that film look by creating this S. So I'll create the top of the S here in the highlights. Go up just a tad, good. And then I'll go to the shadows and I'll bring that down a bit more. Okay. Okay, that's good. And I might just bring the midtones right back here, just about. Yeah, that looks good. All right. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to raise the blacks and lower the whites. So by raising the blacks, it means they're less black, and it kind of gives that faded black look, like that faded look. And then by lowering the whites, it means that they won't be so harsh, and they'll kind of have a more natural roll off. So to raise the blacks, you just go to the very left-hand corner. We'll see how it changes. The cursor changes from this little plus sign to these arrows. And I'll just raise this up just a tad. What are we happy with? Maybe here. That's actually, yeah, that's good. Oh, yeah, here. That's quite a dramatic effect, actually. And then to lower the whites. Now, as I do this, watch the top of her head. So this is it originally, and then bring it down. Original, bring it down. And it's affecting the top of her hair. It's affecting the flowers. It's also affecting that I can see in the background. All right, let's scroll back up, and we'll switch it back to color, and I can see that it's already looking better. If I go here, I can click this, what looks like two wires next to each other, and I can see it before and after. And yeah, that's obviously a lot more eye-catching. It is still too bright. I think the highlights need to be brought in a little bit, but we've got much more contrast and much more punch in terms of the color. Sorry, excuse me. All right, let's see what we need to do. So you want to get that summer afternoon thing. So we need to make this warmer, and it'd be easy to just go into this temperature and start messing around and going to the right, but I don't want to do that, and I don't think that's going to give me the look I want. So I'm just going to double click that and then reset back to normal. While we're here, actually, I might as well give out a little quick tip. If you're in any, like at any point during the develop module, you can click the L key and it'll reduce the screen brightness by 50% while leaving the photo alone. Click it again and it'll reduce it by a further 50%, giving you black. And this allows you to just view the photos as they are, like just isolated from any other thing. And I think this is great for reviewing your photos and seeing like small differences. You can still zoom in, you can still do all of that. You can even still apply effects or adjustment brushes while your screen is blacked out like this, but it's just great because you're not distracted by things around you. So just get out of it. I'll just click L again and we're back. Click this loop button, this one just here on the bottom left, and we'll go back to single view. And I want to make that golden. So I'm going to go back to tone curve, change the channel from RGB, where before we were in RGB, so we were affecting the red, green, blue, all the pixels, all the channels, in the image. But now I'm just going to go red. So I'm just affecting red. And I want to push red up a little bit. That's good. Just a little bit, not too dramatic. And then I'm going to go to blue, and I'm going to bring it down just a little bit. Oh, too much. Yeah, that's good. Okay. Now, I should mention that I know what to do here because I have experience using the tone curve. The tone curve is a very, it's a very dramatic way to edit your image. For example, if I had to plot something here and then just go right up, that looks crazy, right? That doesn't look like, that's not at all what we're going for. But it also illustrates how powerful this tool is. So it's not something that you just mess around with and hope for the best. You need to understand what you're doing. So I'll press Control Z or Command Z if you're on a Mac, and I'll just undo that. But I understand what's happening in terms of the tone curve, just because I know the color theory behind it. But if we very quickly just go to Chrome, and this is totally unscientific, so this may not even be the best way to show it. We look up additive color. Oh yeah, here we go. That's a perfect photo. So this is basically, these are the photos, I mean not the photos, sorry, the colors that make up any computer display. And if you remember correctly, I was pushing red up, so I was increasing the red, and then I was taking away from blue. So if you're taking away from blue, you're pushing the color towards there, which is this yellow we have here. So pushing red up, pushing towards yellow as well, because we're taking away blue, puts us right around here. And that's how I know we're going to get that kind of golden look. But I'm still not happy with it because I don't like how their skin looks, and I still don't really like how some of those trees look, or that sky in the background there. So I'm going to go to camera calibration. Camera calibration, well, you might look at it, especially as a beginner, and be like, or someone who's even used Lightroom for a while, and think, hang on, that looks a lot like this color panel here, but it just has less. Because here we just have red, green, blue, and shadows, when we can adjust hue and saturation. But in color, we have a whole host of colors, basically every color imaginable. And we have hue, saturation, and luminance. So why would anyone use this camera calibration when they have this, when they have this color panel here as well? Well, here's why. If we change the hue of the red, and I'm thinking red would just affect maybe her dress, lips, nostril, some of her hair probably, maybe some of the eyeliner as well. So if we just change the red, so I'll push it towards the left, giving us that deep red look, the kind of more crimson look. Okay, yeah, looks nice. Push it towards the right, and you can see, especially with her lips, how much that's changing. But it's only changing the reds in the image. It's not changing the whole image, just the reds in isolation. And that's what the color tab does. So we can do that for red, we can do the saturation, we can do luminance, which is just like brightness. That's just isolated to these colors presented. Where camera calibration differs is that it's actually changing all the red pixels in the image, or all the green pixels in the image, or all the blue pixels in the image. So there's actually red, green, and blue found all here. So this might just look like you see some blues, you see some greens, but you're like, oh, where's the red? But red is definitely there because red, green, and blue, that's what makes up all the pixels in any image. So when we're changing values here, we're actually affecting every single color in the image. So I'm going to push this blue towards this teal, which I know will give us more of like a kind of an orange tone to her face. So I'm going to push it ever so slightly. Good. And then I'm going to go to the red. I'm going to push it towards the orange here, because then that's going to change her skin towards orange. But it'll also change, like, it will change the green in the background. Like if I pushed it all the way to the right, you can see how immediately her skin looks crazy, but you can see the green is kind of lost in this. It's more yellow in the background. Also, the blues have actually changed as a result. So that's what happens. It actually affects the entire image. But I'm just going to push very slightly. Okay, that's good. I like that. Now let's go to the color panel and let's get these colors sorted. Red, I'm going to push. I want this dress and her lips to kind of contrast with the skin. Just going to push it more towards that crimson. I'm going to leave the saturation alone for now until I get everything else sorted. But I'm going to bring the luminance right down. Not too much, because I feel like there's probably red in her skin, maybe even red spots. Yeah, there. I can see some of them here. So I brought the luminance way down her skin. I'll just completely ruin her skin. It would look terrible. Luminance is down. Orange, I'm going to push the orange slightly, very slightly left. Yellow slightly left. Greens, let's experiment. We push towards, no. Yeah, let's just make it like -4. That's fine. Aqua, there isn't really much aqua in this photo. Blue, push it slightly to the right. Purple, can't really see any purple. Magenta, I'll push it towards the red. All right. Saturation. Let's leave red for now. We'll bring orange down a bit. We'll bring yellow down a bit. Green will also bring down a whole lot more. No, I'm fine with that actually. And then orange, we're going to raise that up. Yellow, we're going to raise that up. Green, we're going to bring it right down, so darken those trees in the background. And blue, bring it down just a little tad. Okay. All right, we're starting to get somewhere. Let's go back up. Now, you would think this is a good time to start the basic panel, especially because I'm looking at this and the highlights are still way too much. There's still too much. They're still too strong. And I still feel like this is a bit too warm as well. It's not quite color balanced the way I'd like it to be. But first, I'm going to use split toning. So what split toning is, it basically allows you to put any kind of color into the highlights or shadows. So I'll provide an example. If I want to raise the saturation on the highlights, now we have this funky red just affecting the highlights. I change it to another color for the shadows. So now we have blue in the shadows and red in the highlights. And that actually kind of looks cool. I mean, it's strange, and it's obviously just for a very specific look. But the basic idea behind split toning is that you can add color into your shadows or highlights, and then you can balance it using this tool. So if you move this towards the left, it means it favors the shadows more so than the highlights. See, it starts to turn blue. And then if you shift it towards the right, it favors the highlights more than the shadows. So I'll just double click that to reset. Bring saturation way down, bring saturation way down. Sorry, still trying to get over cold. What we're going to do is I'm going to cheat actually. I'm going to use a preset that I already have there that came with Lightroom. Because I know that it'll look good on this image, but I want to add some blue to the shadows. And I think I'll add kind of a brown golden look to the highlights, because especially for her hair, I want it to look golden, because I'm trying to get that summer afternoon look. So I'll go for the shadows, and I might even zoom in for this one. So I'll click here, and this allows me to get into my presets, which you can change by simply, you can actually use this color picker. I think it's a much more effective way to find the color you're after. And then if you want to change the preset, you just find the color you're after, and then you hold down on one of these spots to change the preset. But I'm going to use this preset right here. Yep, good. And it's very subtle. You actually probably don't even notice it. But if I could turn off this panel by using this button in the top left-hand corner of the panel, turn off and on, off and on. Very subtle. Highlights, I'm going to use another preset. I'm going to use this one just here. I could use this one, but I fear that it's going to be too bright and it won't look natural. So use this one. It's a bit too strong, but that's okay. We'll bring the saturation down. Let's say 14. 14, and then I'm going to balance it. I'm going to favor the shadows a bit more. I'm going to shift this down so I'm happy. Yeah, that's fine. That's good. Okay, so I've used all of that. Let's go back up. And now we're finally back in basic. I'm actually going to close tone curve, close color, split toning, and close that because we don't really need to use those again. So let's go here. I'm going to bring the highlights way down. Let's get that hair and those flowers in check. Okay. Bring the shadows up a bit because I want to see some detail on this side of her face. So I'm going to bring the shadows up. Bring the whites right down. Yeah, that's good. I'm going to leave the blacks, actually. I'm going to leave them as they are because I don't want to lose any contrast that we've done. I might change the temperature. I might actually cool it down just a little bit. Cool that down. And then I want to shift her skin tones away from, because there's so much magenta in them I can see, which I introduced by making the photos so warm. So I'm going to shift it more towards green, just a tad. Good. Add some contrast, we'll say 20 contrast, and then 15 clarity. Okay, yeah, wow. Let's go back to our before and after. That's looking really good so far. I'm really liking the look of that. Okay, so back to loop view. The last thing I want to do before I go into very final step, which is sharpening, and I'll explain why you should always leave sharpening at the very end. I'm going to do something with her face. So I'm going to use a radial filter, which is a local adjustment. And you'll notice when I click the radial filter button, which is this circle up here, it gives us very similar tools to what we have in these panels, except now we have local adjustments, which means that we can draw a spot that we want to work on. So I'm going to draw this oval, bring it to her face. And what's happened here, because there's all this red, that's because I have the mask overlay turned on, which is this button, which just shows what you're affecting. So I'll turn that off. And you'll notice how everything outside the circle is being affected, but we want it to be focused on her. So let me get this circle perfect first. Let's just make sure it's actually affecting the face, and it will be very rough. If this was like something I was taking my time with, I would I'd be more careful, but it's okay. That's about her face. Yeah. Maybe. No, that's good. Maybe no, actually that's fine. But it's doing everything outside of her face. Her face is being left alone, but we want to focus on the face. So we'll click the invert button, and now we're just doing her face. But that looks strange, right? Like if I click done, what the hell? That looks totally weird. So we'll click radial filter again. We'll click this pin, which allows us to edit the filter we just created. Geez, worst time to record something like this, and my throat's just slowly dying. And then we'll use the exposure one, because these are all presets that are already made up, like Lightroom makes up. But I'm not going to use this as it is. I can edit any one of these and then create my own presets and save them. So I'm going to reset exposure, which means now actually within that filter, there's nothing going on. It's totally the same as the previous, like, it's totally the same as the rest of the photo. Sorry, I can't speak right now. So I'm going to add some exposure, brighten it up, add a little bit of contrast. Oops, too much. Highlights I'm going to bring right down so our face doesn't glow. Shadows I'm going to bump up so I can see some more detail in those darker areas. Whites I'm going to bring down just a little bit, once again, so it doesn't glow. And then clarity I'm going to bring up. And there's one final thing before we leave this, feathering. You have to make sure you use the desired feathering settings. So feathering is basically, it affects the edges of this filter. It kind of fades them in. So if I put feathering all the way to 0, which means it's off, I click done, you'll see how there's a very obvious circle around her face. You can see the line just there and also here. So it looks very unnatural. So we go back into radio filter and then we click on this pin so we can edit that filter. What we need to do is we need to feather in those effects so it kind of naturally blends in with the image that we have. And it's all a matter of taste and just like trying to figure out what looks right. So we'll stop around, yeah, we'll stop around there. Done. Okay, that doesn't look edited at all. One final thing, we'll use an adjustment brush, which is just this long thing here, or you can press the letter K. And thankfully, we have two things. We have iris enhance and teeth whitening. These come standard with Lightroom. And they basically allow you to, well, they're just the names. Iris would just bring out the color of someone's eyes, and teeth whitening would just make their teeth whiter. Now to zoom in, when you're using the adjustment brush, because if you click as you would normally, you will start painting on her face. Hold down spacebar, and then click to zoom. Or you can just, actually that's it. Hold down spacebar and just click where you want to zoom in. But you have to hold down spacebar while you're doing it. Right, let's go iris enhance. Our size is pretty good already, but we can change the brush size here and also the feathering for the effect. And flow is very important because flow is kind of the strength of the effect. If we have flow at 100% on this effect, I know for a fact that her eyes will look way too bright and unnaturally bright. And even 77 is a bit too strong. So I'm going to bring this right down to like 44, sure. I also turn on auto mask. And what auto mask does is it tries to figure out differences in your image, like places of high contrast. And then it tries to stay within wherever you're painting. So if I were to paint on her skin and then I got some towards the hair, the job of auto mask is to try and not do the hair. It'll be like, oh, wait, you're painting on this, and then you probably didn't mean to paint on that because that looks totally different. So it just won't paint there. And it doesn't work 100%. It often still needs help, but it is better than nothing. And in this case, I just want to focus on her eyes, and I don't want to get, the eyelashes and all that. But just to help me, I'm going to also turn on this show selected mask overlay. So this shows me whatever I'm doing in terms of painting. So if I'm painting on the forehead, paint. And you can see all that red is just what I've done. And that's because I've turned this setting on. Press Ctrl Z, just undoes that effect. And now I'll just go to her eyes, paint in. Okay, that looks good. And her other eye, paint in. And I'm being pretty rough about this because I don't think I have the time to, be super careful. That's done. And instead of clicking done down the bottom here, I'm actually going to scroll back up and click new. So that effect's taken place. And now I'm just going to do the teeth whitening, go back to teeth. I'm going to turn up the flow for this, like 80, sure. And then once again, auto mask and mask overlay is on, so we'll see it in red. Let's just paint her teeth. And we're being kind of rough with it, but just kind of, yep, that's good. And now we're done. Oh, zoom out. All right. I still feel as if this image is a little bit bright though, so I'm going to go to exposure, bring it down, bring it down. Oh, yeah. Let's do it before and after. Yeah. Let's bring it. Oops, let's bring it up just a little bit. Okay. And that's it. That's it. Actually, that's basically what I want to do with this image. Um, I do think I went a little overboard with the iris enhance, and her eyes are like shining, like she's out of bloody Twilight. But that was just that's fine because I'm trying to illustrate the effect to you of like how you can do local adjustment, and you can just do one area of the image rather than affecting the whole image. So now, final thing before you export anything is sharpening. That should always be the final step because sharpening tends to, if you have a lot of images, it tends to really slow down your computer or slow down Lightroom because it's very CPU intensive. It's heavy on your processor. So we go to detail, and I'm not going to touch noise reduction because I don't think there's very much noise in this photo, to be honest. If we actually click I, the letter I on your keyboard, you can bring up information, you click it again, and yeah, see ISO 100, f2.5, and this is probably taken on a Canon 50mm f1.4 USM. I know it's a Canon camera because it's a CR2 RAW file. But yeah, at ISO 100, we're not going to see much noise. The only noise you can kind of see is maybe here, at the bottom of the dress, maybe some here. But it's honestly so, you can barely notice it. So I really wouldn't pick on it at all. That's why I'm going to leave noise reduction alone for now. So, sharpening, very quick. We can use this window to kind of zoom in on select areas. And typically what you want to zoom in on is the area that's in focus, where the focal point is. You don't want to be zooming in here because you can't see anything. You're not sharpening anything. It's just the background blur. So I'm going to zoom in on her eye. Just click and drag. Yep, try and get the eyelashes and eyebrow, because that way I can see some fine detail on the hair. And let's go. Now, amount, radius, detail, masking. It's a bit confusing knowing like what all these settings do and how come there isn't just one slider that says, hey, amount of sharpening. But you need to understand what each thing is doing and how it actually applies to your sharpening effort. Because if you just put amount up, you just went, I'll just sharpen, max sharpening. It actually looks terrible. It's probably when it comes to YouTube because of compression. But I've completely destroyed her skin just by like raising the sharpening up. Like I've exposed all these little bits of noise in her skin. And I've also destroyed the background. Now the background has so much more noise in it as well. So I'm just going to double click to reset. Instead, I actually like to work backwards. Let's start from masking. And we'll hold down the Alt key, which I think on Mac, I guess you guys have an Alt key as well, but it's like Alt and Option. But hold down the Alt key, and you'll know you're holding it down when this sharpening changes from sharpening to reset sharpening. See? So Alt key off, holding that Alt key now, and it's reset sharpening. And we'll go to masking. What masking is it's telling Lightroom what to take effect on. In this case, we just want to sharpen hair. We don't want to sharpen the background because what's the point? And we're just going to introduce noise. We just want hair to be sharpened. So hold down Alt and we'll start to drag this right. And you'll notice it changes to this strange black and white image. And what's happening here is that everything that's white is going to be sharpened and everything that's black is going to be left alone. So we'll change this and we'll shift until we're just pretty much getting hair. I don't want to get the background. And we could go 100%, but then I think that's not sharpening enough for the image. So, sure. Maybe bring it down just a little bit. Okay, 72, let go. And now I know that anything else I do in these three sliders is only affecting basically hair and the flowers. It's not going to affect this. Now let's go radius. And the way to think of radius is it's almost like the thickness of sharpening. But I'll actually illustrate it by holding down Alt again and look in this window and what happens to our eyes, the eyelashes, and the eyebrows. So at 1, which is where we are, that's what it looks like. And if I drag all the way to the right, see how it brings it out? Yeah, so that's actually quite an extreme effect. And if you were to turn your radius all the way up, it looks very strange. Like the detail in the image will look very odd. It looks, yeah, totally unnatural. So this is also a matter of personal taste, and I'm just going to go up to 1.6. And now we can work on the amount and detail. So the amount is sharpening is just, well, how sharp do you want this to be? And all sharpening is just contrast between pixels. Whereas if you're, turning up contrast in your basic panel, that's looking for large groups of pixels and how bright something is, how dark something is, and how you can change them. But with sharpening, it's actually looking at individual pixels. So we'll look at a pixel, say like one little tiny pixel that makes up an eyebrow, and then the next little tiny pixel makes up another part of our eyebrow. And it would say, oh, okay, that one's a bit darker, that one's a bit lighter. We can make them, this one darker, this one lighter, and that'll make this look more sharp. So let's just bring up sharpening again. And we can actually hold down Alt for all of these settings. And I'll say, just let me think. Here, that's good. That's good right there. Detail is very similar to amount, but what detail does, it just affects things in a high frequency. So it's almost like minor details in a sense. It's like the little things, like little bits of hair here, little tiny things here in the eyelashes. It just affects those. It doesn't affect like larger parts of the image. Sorry, I'm just taking a drink. I don't know why I recorded this while I'm like, my throat's feeling so sore. So we'll just bring up the detail a little bit. And whatever, I'm happy with that. Like, there's really actually not a lot of sharpening to be done in this photo. But check this, actually. You can really see how much of a difference it's made if you go before and after. Check out how much more detail. I mean, I hope it comes through on YouTube, but how much more detail you can see on her face, like in the fine lines on the right-hand side, because it's a staggering amount. There's so much more detail. Just in terms of like her hair, you see the top of her head, and there's also so much more contrast. But yeah, that's basically it. So this photo is ready for export, but I'm just gonna take that away, and remember to press L, 50%, L again, and there we have it. We started out with this image, and we kind of brought in this whole new look, and it's really punchy. I would say it's a bit dramatic. Typically, I wouldn't edit a photo in this way where it's so contrasty and where it's really screaming for attention. But just for the sake of like this tutorial, and so things are kind of clearly illustrated to you, the viewer, I think it works well. You can really see how much work has gone into this image and how you kind of come close to that summer afternoon look that I was talking about. Anyway, click L again, and now let us export. So we're back here in the library, and exporting is as simple as just selecting your image and then clicking export right next to the import button. Export location, where is it going to be saved? File naming, what are you going to name it? If you want to name it something specific. Video, that only applies if you have a video file as part of your export or what you've selected to export. But the two things I actually want to talk about here are file settings and image sizing. I'm going to take a very quick drink. Because my throat's killing me. Far out. All right, let's wrap this up. File format, what should you do? I would say in most cases, especially if you're watching this video, JPEG is the way to go. PSD is for Photoshop, TIFF is an uncompressed photo file, and then DNG is what I talked about earlier. It's Adobe's own proprietary RAW format. Or you can do original, which keeps it in the format you edited it in. In this case, it's CR2, so it's Canon's RAW format. But if you're uploading to the web, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, JPEG is the way to go. And I don't even think any of those sites would they wouldn't accept PSD, TIFF, or DNG. They would just be like, what is this? And they wouldn't let you upload. So JPEG is the way to go. it is a lossy compression, which means that you technically lose some detail, but it's such a small amount of detail, and the human eye can't see it. Like you might be like, well, I can see it, but you can't see it. That's just a fact. Some very smart people figured out a long time ago that they figured out how to compress things and take away information so that we had smaller files without having any discernible change in the photo. So JPEG's fine. Don't do anything else unless you bring it into Photoshop or some other program to edit. Or TIFF, actually. You can use TIFF if you're like going to print out of a printer. That's actually the best. That's the best format by far if you want to retain the color information. But let's just go JPEG because for the vast majority of users, that's where we want to keep it. Quality, honestly, if you're doing like Facebook or Instagram, 80 is fine. You can do 100 quality, but I've noticed at 80, no one's going to notice it all, and you probably won't notice either. You can either go as low as 60 if you're really running short on space, or you just want to upload faster, like maybe your internet's not so great or you don't have a lot of data. So 60's okay. That's probably the lowest that I would ever go. But if you're just going, social media, 80 is totally fine. You can also limit your file size. I would only recommend this if you're very particular about your space or your internet really sucks and you want to limit how much you're uploading. Because sometimes when you limit your file size, you're like, oh, that just means smaller files. But then you look at the quality image and it's just terrible. Like it looks so bad. So only do this if you're very particular about space. Otherwise, just try not to touch this too much. It's like a last resort kind of thing. Now, this is the big thing, color space. If sRGB, Display P3, Adobe RGB, ProPhoto RGB, the one you definitely won't be using is ProPhoto. But out of all these, you should be using sRGB, sorry. That's technically the worst one, worst in in speech marks, but I'll explain why you should be doing sRGB. So quickly back to Chrome, and let's look up sRGB. Okay, because you might hear things like maybe you have an iPhone and you've like heard marketing that goes, hey, the new iPhone, 10 or whatever supports P3 color space, and you're like, ooh, and it says like wide color gamut. You're like, oh, okay. Why wouldn't I use DCI P3 if it just means better colors or richer colors? And here's why. So here is what we call the CIE 1931 color space. It's basically like back in 1931, hence the name, this Commission on Illumination, this French organization, they try to map out what colors the human eye can see. And so they mapped it out into this little graph we have here. And the reason for this is so that you could put dot points on, you could plot, where certain colors were in this space. So you could be like, oh, I use this red in this image and it's round about here, right? However, our eyes can see a lot more than our colors, our eyes can see a lot more than our computers or our phones or our TVs can show. And so all these displays are set to certain color profiles or certain gamuts. And these are the ones we have here. sRGB, which is this black triangle. This red triangle is DCI P3. It's actually meant for cinema. And then this yellow triangle is Adobe RGB, which is actually what my laptop's capable of. But I don't run it in Adobe RGB most of the time. I run it in sRGB. And the reason for that is that 99% of the content on the web is in sRGB. Most displays on the consumer market can't show Adobe RGB or DCI P3. It's really only within the last few years that we've actually had displays capable of showing these. And even when they are capable of showing them, it's a whole another story whether or not they're actually properly calibrated at the factory to show colors correctly. So you might look at these and be like, it looks like they show more colors. There's more green, there's more blue, there's more red. Why wouldn't you choose DCI P3 or Adobe RGB? And it's the caveat of being a photo editor is that at the end of the day, no matter what you do in Lightroom or in Photoshop, you don't know what device your viewer's viewing the photo on. So you can only control what you do, and you can calibrate your monitor, you can do all these things, but ultimately you don't know if they're viewing it on the most recent iPhone 10 or if they're viewing it on like an old Android phone or an old laptop or like a MacBook, from early 2000s, which have like just terrible, terrible screens in comparison. Um, I believe in fact, that every iPhone basically has been tuned to sRGB with only, I think the iPhone 7 was the first to support DCI-P3. And then like I think the iPads were actually even before iPhones. Samsung Galaxy S Note 7 maybe. The Note 7 was the first to support DCI-P3, but even before that, it supported Adobe RGB, but it wasn't color managed, so it had the capability to show these extra colors, but it often was still too saturated. So yeah, that's why I say just keep it at sRGB. We really shouldn't be here at this point, like in 2017. sRGB was invented in 1996, I think, by HP and Microsoft, and it's not. It was meant to be like a stopgap, like, oh, we'll just do that for now because our old CRT monitors can only show this many colors. But unfortunately, it's 2017, and geez, that's like wow, almost like over 20 years like after that, and we're still using sRGB just because most manufacturers haven't bothered to put in good quality displays that can show off these higher gamut. Sorry, these wider profiles. But keep it sRGB for now. And the advantage of this is that if you export in sRGB, like you know that whoever's viewing the photo will at least see it the way you want them to. If you do it in Display P3 or Adobe RGB, and someone views it in like an old display, or it's just something that isn't properly calibrated, they'll just be like, "What the hell? The colors look all funky." But if you keep the photos in your library, maybe sometime in the future, hopefully within the next few years, we'll have more devices that have a wide gamut display, and then you can just go back in and then re-export all your photos in Display P3 or Adobe RGB. It'll probably be Display P3. It seems like the consumer market anyway in terms of displays is shifting towards Display P3. Adobe RGB seems to be more for like graphics work, like graphics design. And ProPhoto RGB, that's like huge. That's actually what Lightroom is set to, but it's like a massive color space. In fact, if we were to just go real quick, ProPhoto RGB, here we go. That's a tiny image. How am I supposed to do anything with that? No, that doesn't look anything like that. Oh, here we go. Yeah. Oh, geez. I didn't realize how massive that was. So you can see sRGB, it's pretty small. Adobe RGB, okay, a bit larger. And then ProPhoto RGB, which is what Lightroom is actually using when you're developing. It's absolutely massive. Actually, it's so massive, it goes outside of this color space. But it's like theoretical colors that you technically can't like see, but you can work. I don't really understand all of the science behind it. But the point of this was to say, stick to sRGB because that's what everyone can see for now. And very last thing, where are we moving all over the place? Image sizing. Okay, if you're uploading to Facebook or the Instagram, you shouldn't be uploading in original size. And the reason for that is that they're going to compress it anyway. So why would you upload in original size? You're just creating larger files, which then you have to upload, so they take longer to upload. And it's wasted effort. What you should be doing, you should be resizing. And what I like to resize by is the long edge, because I know right about what the highest resolution it is for like Facebook or for Instagram. For example, I know that Facebook, the highest resolution you can go to is 2048 pixels. So I'll resize to fit the long edge, which means it could be, in this picture, because it's a portrait, it would be this y-axis. But if it was like a landscape photo, then of course it'd be the x-axis. And I'll just change that to 2048. And Lightroom will do the rest of the calculations, so it will just figure out what the other axis needs to be in order to maintain the look and like the aspect ratio of your photo. But that's if I was doing Facebook. If I was doing Instagram, I think theirs is 1080, so just switch that to 1080. So you shouldn't be there's no point uh, exporting files that are larger than what you need, because you just take up more space, it's taking longer. And you don't need to worry about this resolution thing, because that's actually just for if you're printing. You would have to change resolution. This number won't at all affect you if it's an image on the computer screen. Sharpen, keep that on for screen. Amount standard. You can do for like matte glossy paper, but that's obviously if you're going to print the photo. And in the rest of these settings, you can kind of figure out yourself. Metadata is like if you have GPS data, like where you took the photo, so you might want to strip that so people can't stalk you. Watermark, if you have your own watermark. And there's also sort of like post-processing. So after the export, there's other options you can do. But yeah, hopefully this super long and possibly boring tutorial has been helpful.